Spraying dormant oil and copper on fruit trees. Is it really necessary? Hi everybody, I'm Allie and I've been orcharding here for over 35 years. And in this video, we're gonna go over the whys, the how, and when to spray your fruit trees, if at all. Insects, mites, their eggs, scale, and disease pathogens can overwinter in your fruit trees. And by spraying a horticultural oil and a copper, you can really combat these problems so that you have a better production come summer months. I like to spray 3 applications during the dormant season, with the first one being around Thanksgiving time. And this is when we have about 75% of our leaves that have dropped or even more. And then the second one is around Christmas time. This is when everything has dropped, we're completely dormant. And then the next one is around Valentine's Day. This is when we start to get some bud swell, especially on our plum trees around here. Now you could go a little bit later if you live in a cold season. You can go up to where the bud starts to swell and almost shows a little bit of color but not open yet. That's another really good time to be spraying your last application. So use those 3 dates to spray around Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Valentine's, give or take a couple of weeks. For my dormant oil, I'm just going to be using the Monterey's Horticultural Oil. It is an oil base and its job is to smother any eggs, any insects, the scale, and the mites so that you don't have the outbreak come springtime. And as far as the copper goes, this really helps if you've ever had any problems with peach leaf curl, fire blight, canker, and it even helps with brown rot. The years that I haven't used the copper, then I've really had a problem with the peach leaf curl, and then my production is little to none. And so it's a good idea if you've ever had that or you have neighboring trees to use the copper spray at least once during the season. When you're spraying your fruit trees, make sure that you do it on a calm day. It makes it a lot easier to spray those trees without it blowing away. And reaching the top of those trees is a lot easier without a breeze. And also do it on a warm day. The copper doesn't even work unless it's 41 degrees or warmer. Plus, everything just mixes a little bit better when it's not freezing outside. You also want to look into the forecast and make sure that you're not expected rain within the next 24 hours because that product needs to dry on those trees so that it can take effect. And then it's not a waste that way. But 48 hours dry time is definitely a lot better. There are several types of sprayers that you can use. If you're using one that you've already had, make sure that you've never used an herbicide, a weed killer in it, because that can transfer over to your liquid, and then when you spray your fruit trees, it can actually harm them. There's little trigger sprayers that they're okay if you've got a really small tree that's young, but they can be pretty tiresome with your hands. They do make these hose-in sprayers and they mix it for you as it sprays, which is really nice. You do pay a couple dollars extra for it for the convenience of it, but sometimes it's worth it. There's the little sprayers like these, but you can usually go through this really quick on just one tree. Then you've got your tank sprayers, and those work really good. If you've got a lot of fruit trees like we do here, we've got 48, so we have a large tank sprayer that goes off of our lawnmower and it gets the job done really quick. But there's several choices out there. Just make sure you get one that sprays really nice. Make sure that you read your application rates for all of your products because they're all a little bit different, and even each product has different rates for different plants. Such as the horticultural oil, it'll call for 2 tablespoons to 5 tablespoons per gallon of water. So if we were spraying a leafy green, we'd go for the 2 tablespoons because it can cause some burn. But on a hardwood, like our fruit trees, then I always go for the 5 tablespoons per gallon of water because I want to make sure that I get a good heavy coverage to kill those insects and eggs that overwinter in their little cracks. And then as far as your copper fungicide, this one here calls for 0.5 to 2 ounces, so it's a little different measurement, so make sure you read these to get the right rate. And on this one, I'll also go for the higher dosage for spraying my fruit trees. And one of the most important things when you're doing these is shake these guys, especially when it's cold, because they settle and they can kind of get clumpy, and then they don't pour very well and they don't mix very well. So shake them really good. You can mix your horticultural oil and copper in the tank at the same time. Just use each one's application rates and mix it in the tank together. Now, if you've never had any problem with peach leaf curl or fire blight, and there isn't any in your area, then you might want to just bypass the copper because there really wouldn't be any need for that. But definitely do the horticultural oil because it really helps combat those bugs. And I always look for a label on it that says for organic gardens and orchards. And you'll find this right on the front because I like to stay organic in my garden and my orchard at all times. Let's talk bees for just a little bit. There are no active bees right now in our orchard because our trees are dormant, it's cold, and so it's totally safe to be spraying our fruit trees at this point with our copper and our horticultural oil. And copper, it doesn't have any insecticidal properties as well. But as our buds start to swell and we start to get flowers, then our bees become active and they're searching for that pollen. So we definitely don't want to be spraying our trees when we have flower or bee activity. So you can spray up to the pink bud before there are bees, and at that point you don't want to spray beyond that. I like to spray on a calm morning, and hopefully it's a sunny day because this allows that spray to dry on those trees rather quickly. Okay, let's get our spray all mixed up so we can spray our fruit trees. And so I filled my tank up already. This is a 2-gallon tank, and I filled it up with the water first because if I add my copper first and my horticulture oil, it actually can create a lot of foam, and then you'll end up with an inaccurate measurement or just a big mess. So the copper calls for 2 ounces, and so I'm going to use 4 ounces in my water, and then my horticulture oil calls for 5 when we're using the highest amount that we're going to use, 5 tablespoons per gallon of water. So we're going to use 10 in this. So we'll get this mixed up. We're going to agitate it really good before we start to spray. I'll be using my tank sprayer for most of my fruit trees because I've got 48 of them, and using a small sprayer, it'll take a long time to get through all of the trees. So when I'm mixing up, I don't want to be using tablespoons because filling that tank sprayer up with 125 tablespoons, that's a lot of measuring. So just go to Google, convert your tablespoons into cups, and it'll be 8 cups, and it'll be a lot faster to measure like that. Before you start to spray, test your nozzle. You want to make sure that you don't have a sharp stream of spray coming out because that's wasteful and it's hard to get good coverage. You also don't want a really fine mist because that's also hard to cover and it takes a long time, and a lot of times that mist just goes into the air. You want somewhere just in the middle to where you get a nice even coverage. We want a good complete coverage with our spray, and pay special attention to the crotches of the tree and the nooks and crannies because this is where the insects like to hide and lay their eggs. So make sure you spray those a little extra hard, and then I really like to hit the trunks really heavy as well because the bark is usually a little bit bigger, and that's another good place for eggs to hide. So I'll just go up and down that trunk, let it go down into the soil line just a little bit, and I'll walk all around this tree and hit every nook and cranny of this tree. Just as I was coming up with some spray, I spotted this praying mantis egg here, and we definitely don't want to spray this with the horticultural oil, and so I'm glad that I caught it quick enough. So I'll just nip this guy off. I might put him in the greenhouse, or I'll just attach this with some string later on after I'm done spraying. Pretty cool little creatures. I love the way that the horticultural oil makes the bark just turn nice and dark brown. It makes them really pretty. I've only got one more spray of the season once I'm done with these trees, once the buds swell. Then we're ready for spring. Till next time, see ya!